Hey, on tonight's show, we will be delving into the great book to look at passages that describe encounters with the paranormal that are events that have had profound effects on the people of that time, and not to mention those that currently study the Bible and attend church. Now, are these miracles from the Almighty, or is there a possible explanation that is not of this planet and has an extraterrestrial origin? Author Ken Goudsward will be here with us tonight to talk about several of these encounters and his book, UFOs in the Bible. And Ken Goudsward is right now.
Welcome to the Three Beards Podcast. My name is Craig, along with Austin and Chris.
Passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century.
Let me out.
I'm afraid that is why justice and honor in Massachusetts colony?
All right, everybody, welcome to the show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Right now, let's bring on Chris here. Chris, welcome back, man. As I said, we're still feels weird not having Austin here, but maybe we get him at the beginning of summer. But
I can look down like him and just look and just have a red beard.
Until then, we could either get either the producer, my son, and get him an orange beard to wear on his face, or we could bring on babyface Mark Eddy here with us. The man who, no matter how much hard he tries, cannot grow that beard. He's tried. Welcome to the show.
I was I don't know, like testosterone deficient or something. I don't know.
We'll just get you the Chia Pet stuff. You just rub on there and see what happens here. But yeah, so all right, so we tease him. Like I said, let's just get right into it. Let's bring on Ken Goudsward. Welcome to the show, sir. How are you?
I'm doing great, and don't worry, I've got the third beard for you.
Yes. As I said, we have it. We've been doing a pretty good streak here. The guests have been having a beard, so it's been helping out. So I'm bringing up here. Let me bring up on the screen here so everybody can see what we're talking about with the book. So this is the book that we're talking about right here. UFO in the Bible is going to be the main one we're talking about. We're also going to be touching on Magic in the Bible and Numa Elish. That's the one about that's the Akkadian mythology.
Yeah,
you were saying? Okay. And that's we'll be touching on those and a little bit about, you can find all that. Go to Amazon.com is a great place to find that information, or you can also find him at DimensionFold.com. Authors, obviously, Ken, go check him out there. And before I forget, everybody can also go to his channel, and you guys have some really amazing videos on there right now that I checked out.
Thank you.
I was really enjoying that. We've had mutual guests that we've had on too, and I really love talking to them. Jim Willis and Michael Carter. Those guys are fantastic. And so
it's always fun talking to them.
Yeah, so you guys could go subscribe to Dimension Fold. Show them some support as well. They have some fantastic, like I said, videos on there. So definitely. And then also you can go to, for the rest, get this out. You can find him on Twitter.com, Ken Goudsward, Instagram, Ken Goudsward. We're noticing a theme here. You can also find him on Facebook. As crazy enough, Ken Goudsward. It's crazy, I know. So that you can check him out there. But enough with that. Did I miss anything?
I think that's good.
All right. I notoriously get the ADD squirrel thing, and I jump off the ship and I forget the critical thing. So my first question for let's wait on the question. I just want to make a statement. I absolutely love the way that you adopted the Hynek scale in your book. That I just,
Thank you.
Yeah, the way that you broke that down, and that was one of my questions for you. Did you start outlining the book this way with that in mind, or was this something that just came through with the research and it's like, this is a great way to lay this out?
Yeah. So, well, it's kind of funny because I never really was a believer in UFOs, but I always kind of thought it was pretty interesting and fascinating, and really sort of over the last couple years have been growing to be more of a believer, and I guess I am now. But it was almost just the process of writing this book was instrumental in changing my mind on the whole thing. So so to me, the Hynek scale was a really great tool because, first of all, it excludes the really far away, hey, there's just a light. What is it? I don't know. It looks like a light. Like, there's not much you can do with that. So even though a couple of the cases, like the Star of Bethlehem, falls into that category, it also kind of acts different as well. So to me, that was a good starting point. And I had heard people talk about the Star of Bethlehem before in terms of debating whether that could have been a UFO or not. And then the other explanations for it, like things like it's a comet or things like that, which never added up to me because comets don't move erratically, then stop, then start moving again, then stop and bring you to a specific house. That's not what comets do.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
So yeah. So then going on from there, the second part of the Hynek scale is the physical evidence, and to me that's vitally important because I approach things as a scientist. I have a computer science background, and I did a lot of physics and math and chemistry. So to me, that I can understand, right? And it's like I'm a spiritual person as well. I grew up in the church and all this, and was a deacon for a few years. So it's not that I have to see it to believe it, but it helps if you can see something. And the more data we can get on something, I think the better informed we are and the better decisions we can make. So when I approached the topic, I did not approach this book as I want to sit down and prove a point. By no means, because really what it was I have no idea. And I basically, after watching a few Ancient Aliens episodes where claims were made, such as, usually talking about the prophet Ezekiel and a couple of other instances that people look at. And so basically I was like, well, do they have any kind of evidence for this at all, or is this just total BS? So that was really what it was. It was a question that I could go either way on. So the Hynek scale is useful in that, in terms of also starting at the sort of, I guess, more easy to believe end of things, and then working on to the crazier shit, right? So it's like,
oh yeah,
because by the end of the book, it's getting kind of crazy here. So I think if I had dove into those cases at the beginning, I don't know, man.
Well, we have one.
I handle that mentally.
Yeah, it's a long running joke for me. I've said it in a couple of shows, but it's always been when Jesus leaves the disciples. I've always just referred to it as the helium balloon Jesus, because everybody just believes it's like a helium balloon that he just starts floating away. And it's like, bye guys, I'll miss you. Take care of each other, as he just floats off into the heavens. And when you have stuff like this, it makes more sense if you think it along the lines of, Stargate, Star Trek, where something like all of a sudden, boom, it just like disappears, it goes. That makes so much more sense to me. And than just these simple like floating away. And we'll get into it, like Ezekiel and the fire, fiery chariot. All right, no,
Yeah.
I think it's Elijah. Sorry, Elijah and the chariot.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ezekiel's wheel,
Well,
but
so
Elijah. Mhm. Go ahead.
Elijah's taken up to heaven in a fiery chariot. Then you got Enoch. Enoch walked with God and was no more because the Lord took him. What does that
Mhm.
mean, right? Yeah, so those are fascinating questions, and those are some of the questions that I look at, and I'm not necessarily really even trying to answer them per se in terms of, well, what really happened, but what kind of one of the main questions that I was approaching was, what is the Bible actually saying? Because I grew up being told that the Bible is the Word of God, the Bible is inerrant, the Bible is always correct, and some people even said the Bible is everything you ever need to know. Which, I mean, obviously, maybe that's taking it a little bit too far because the Bible doesn't, doesn't talk about COVID for one thing.
Yeah.
But so I kind of I think that the Bible is a really cool book, and it's got a lot of good stuff in it. But the Bible itself makes claims that I think you need to look at, and some of the claims that we make about the Bible in terms of doctrine and dogma are not what the Bible actually even claims about itself. And honestly, a lot of these claims don't have any evidence to stand on, especially if you're looking at the Bible as a source of your evidence. So,
No,
what does the Bible say?
and that's exactly it. It's just, and one of those things, it's like one of the questions I was going to have for you too. And I've always had that part for people where you can't pick and choose. It's like, it's either this thing is literally the Word of God, so that way everything in this thing is to be taken literally, or we must take it things as allegory, as these are just, like I've said, like the 10 Commandments, whether you believe in God or not, the 10 Commandments is an amazing thing to live your life by. Don't sleep with your neighbor's spouse. Don't steal. Don't cheat. Don't kill. These are tenets in life that nobody could say, well, yeah, I don't agree with that. I mean, it has nothing to do with religion. These are standards of living. Doesn't matter what faith, they all teach these same things. Don't kill.
Right.
And that's not
right. Those are just smart things. Those you could call it 10 ways to avoid prison sentences.
Yes, exactly. That is, and they would have no problem putting that in front of a courthouse. But as soon as you put the 10 Commandments, they're like, nope, can't have it. And you're like,
yeah,
I don't.
So this 10 Commandments thing though is really intriguing because we're always I mean, I don't know about you, but the way I was taught about the 10 Commandments, the story goes like this. Here's Moses, he goes up the mountain, God's there, he gets these two pieces of stone, he comes down, you have that whole thing with the golden calf, and he gets mad and he smashes them, so he has to go up and get another set, which he does. Well, that's sort of true, but it's also a very I would say that that's a very corrupted reading of the story, because it's very shortened and oversimplified, because Moses does go up the mountain, but not twice. He goes up the mountain 7 times. Moses does go up the mountain, but he's not the only one. There's actually 76 people that go up the mountain. And then what does Moses bring back down the mountain is not very clear, really. So there's the Bible, in the story in the book of Exodus, they talk about Moses bringing messages from God, and there's also a part about Moses bringing some stone, like, it's not super clear what they are, but I'll call it a stone tablet for now. But those two things are not necessarily the same one and the same thing. Whatever's on these two stones, there does seem to be data involved. But it's not necessarily the Ten Commandments. And in fact, as I'll go into it in more detail in the book, but in fact, it's technically wrong to assume that those two things are the same, because it's pretty clear actually when you dig into it that the stones do not have the Ten Commandments on them. They have some other data.
Now in the chat, I want everybody to put who didn't realize that when they've been reading the story, because I'm sure there's quite a few that are that way, and also part B to that way. Did Mel Brooks get it right then? God has given us these 10 commandments.
10.
I mean, he kind of got it more right than my pastor did. I'm just saying.
I know. Who doesn't love that scene? I think out of pretty much the majority of the movie, that's the one that's always stuck to me just from first watching it. It was just coming down, just that tablet breaking. It's just like, oh, 10.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of getting back on the series, like you said with that, I've from longest time, like in these stories, I've wondered these things, because some have referred to this as a download, basically it was almost like plugging into, whether you want to say like the Akashic record, this type of thing, where he's gone up and it was like almost like an interface, is where I've heard it referred to as times. And so there's been that talk that not only was it just like, there wasn't just 10 lines carved into these tablets, it was something more like that. Like there was more of I don't know what like a hard drive. I mean, whether it was that type of thing where there was something more imbued on, where like how people think like crystals can be imbued with all that information.
For sure. Now, so I came to the same conclusion, and I have not heard any of those theories before. So I wasn't really into this kind of stuff, but I sat down and started writing a book on it. So it's kind of a funny way to do things, because I don't know what I'm talking about. But on the other hand, all I'm really interested in is what is the Bible saying. So it's kind of good that I don't know what other people are already thinking about it. But yeah, you're right. I came to the same conclusion that there's some kind of crystal, like there's a lot of mention about like sapphire in a couple of different places in there, and it seems like the so-called stone tablets that Moses brings down are some kind of like sapphire based like semiconductor storage device, and he puts it into the Ark of the Covenant after they build the Ark. So what the way I see that is, so he's got well, there's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, because they've got this information as to how to put all these things together, but also it sort of seems like they have to have already had it put together so that they can use them in order to get the data off this thing. So I don't know how to interpret that. It's mysterious, but it does. There's a lot of evidence in there that you could easily interpret it as the Ark of the Covenant is some kind of holographic projector that's reading the data chip that Moses brought down. But then again, you have the problem of how did they build the Ark if that's where the instructions were, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Go ahead.
Before we get too far, and if my memory leads me correct in my research, and the UFO was described as a scroll in Zechariah. Am I correct?
I believe so. There is. I can't remember which one is which, but I think you're right. There's definitely a passage where one of the prophets talks about a giant flying scroll, and he describes it. And I think he might have even measured it specifically. I might be getting mixed up with another one. There's a couple of different accounts with Isaiah.
There's one in Revelation, isn't there?
Yeah, Revelation definitely has a scroll as well.
They're coming from mountains are in the background, and they kind of like fly over. I think Chris is presenting just one out of a few examples.
But
Yeah,
the
I
one
think you're right.
the one in Zechariah, he referred to it as it was like 20 cubits long and 10
Yeah,
cubits wide. So that was
yeah,
the
right.
measurements that he referred to. I knew I had heard that somewhere, and along my research, I went back and found it.
Yeah, that's right. So 20 cubits is pretty big. That's like 30 feet, because a cubit is 18 inches. So he's talking about a 30-foot by 15 or 20-foot object that's flying through the sky, and that appears to be made out of metal. Well, right there, that's exactly what a UFO is something flying in the sky that we don't know what it is. So it's definitely flying. It's definitely unidentified, and it's definitely an object. So it's not some kind of spiritual trance or vision or whatever, which is a lot of times the way that it's framed in our current theology.
So what if so in theory, in question, what if the UFOs was actually the gods coming back down to check on Earth after they
Yeah, for
figured out
sure.
what a UFO actually was?
Yeah, I totally think that is really what's happening. Is that this is not the first time that they've been here. Clearly, we have all of these pieces of the story are all tying together into earlier parts of the story as well. So if you take the story back in time, back through the time when the Israelites were in Egypt, and before that there was Joseph, and before that there was Jacob and Isaac and Abraham, and before that you've got Enoch, and all the way back to Adam. There's all these weird things that are maybe not described in a super great amount of detail as much as we have in some of the later encounters. Like with Moses, it's very detailed. With Ezekiel, it's very detailed. With Isaiah, it starts out. It's kind of, Isaiah's take is really strange because
Mhm.
he and Ezekiel too, is that they sort of describe something, and then they have another encounter later, and they describe it differently. And it's only with a little bit of reading between the lines that you realize they're actually talking about the same thing. So when you have, I believe it's Isaiah who talks about the seraphim, and Ezekiel has the cherubim but he doesn't talk about cherubim until his third or fourth UFO encounter, where he actually gets abducted and taken to Israel from Babylon, where he lives. But before that, back in Ezekiel chapter 1, he is not talking about cherubim. He is, but he doesn't use the word because he doesn't know that that's what it is. Because in his mind, a cherubim is something that lives that's associated with the tabernacle that he's never seen, because the tabernacle lives in the Holy of Holies. No one's allowed to go there. And plus, the city's been destroyed and they've all been taken captive and taken away to Babylon. So he doesn't have any kind of physical description of the cherubim or what the cherubim is for or what it does, because there's this disconnect between 500 years of when Moses received this information and the Babylonian captivity. So during that 500 years, the whole story morphed a lot and got religiousized into something that it never was. And I think that the Israelites themselves lost sight of the physical nature of what had happened in Sinai, that was witnessed by thousands, if not millions, of Israelites that were there witnessing the event. And the entire nation of Israel stood at the base of Sinai and heard the first message from Yahweh, which was basically a safety message saying, hey, you guys don't come too close. I don't know how long this message lasted for, but it was long enough that those however many people there were, millions possibly. I've heard estimates up to 5 million people that were in the Exodus, but it's certainly thousands. And those people all heard it. So if you've got 5,000 people hearing a voice, I don't know what kind of technology you're using to broadcast that, but it's certainly not a guy standing there talking.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. You just mentioned broadcasting. You were just going over the Ten Commandments and some of the building. One of the interesting things about your book UFOs in the Bible is that you do talk about some of these artifacts as well as the engineering concepts for the tabernacle and the Ark of the Covenant, and even broadcasting. And that might be a second question, but you do get into the telepathic communications that was discussed in the book of Daniel.
Right.
It's about 5 questions wrapped up in
okay,
in
yeah.
one.
So sure. So as far as telepathy, that's one possible answer as to how Yahweh was able to speak to 5,000 or 5 million people all at once, or he might have been using a technology. I don't know. There's very little information as far as to how, but the Bible is very clear that that's what happened. That entire group was able to hear God, and they came to Moses and said, "Hey, this is not good. Like, we don't like it. You got to act as our in-between," right? That's very clearly documented. Now, someone in the comments mentioned that none can see God, I believe was a paraphrased.
Let's see if I can find that for you here. Yep.
Yeah, there it is. So
Nice job, producer.
the power of God is too much for a mortal man's eyes to see, and that's true, and that's something that we hear in the Bible time and time again in many different contexts and different ways. So there's this concept that no man can see God, and this is why theoretically somebody had to hide behind a rock, and then they heard the small still voice, and I can't remember who that was now. I do talk about that in the book as well. So there's things like that where it's like, well, God chooses to show himself to certain people, but we're led to believe that it's literally like 2 or 3 people through all of history that have had that privilege. Enoch, Abraham, and I think it was Jacob. But
you do have the chapter on 75 people that partied with God.
Yeah, exactly. And that's never been a part of any sermon that I heard in the 50 years that I went to church. So I don't know about you, but it seems like there's some information being left out. And whether that's on purpose, or whether it's just through pure ignorance, I don't know. But I would have to question, is it possible for every pastor for 2,000 years to be ignorant of a fact that is very clearly written right in the middle of the book of Exodus, in Exodus chapter 24? So if the listeners want to check that out for themselves, Exodus chapter 24, you can clearly read that there are 70 elders that are called to go with Moses, and as well, there's also included a few other people by name, such as I believe in that case it was Aaron, Nahab, and Abihu, and probably Joshua. I can't remember. So you've got 75 or 76. It's not clear there's definitely a large number of people. And it says in that chapter 24 that they went up Sinai and they saw God, and they sat down and ate supper with him. So that doesn't jive with the story that we're being told, right? So something doesn't fit somewhere. And so my approach is, well, why? So what's happening? And I'm not saying that it's because this or because of that, but it makes you wonder. And, there's obviously something going on, because the facts that we're being told don't actually agree with what the Bible is telling us. So
I call pulling that thread, because it's,
yeah.
I mean, this isn't the scope of this show, but just to touch on, you with the story of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Cain's cast out. Well, the Bible doesn't talk at all about this whole other civilization that's out there. And there's even passing reference to the satyrs, to these other creatures. And these are things that just by itself, if you actually take the time to look at this stuff, you look at it and you're like, wait a minute, why isn't this talked about? You talk about Adam and Eve, we all came from Adam and Eve. Well, clearly not, because there's this whole other race civilization that's outside this realm of the Garden of Eden. So where did they come from? Either God created this entire civilization and then decided, they're not working out, let's try, I'm going to start over, and got Adam and Eve, let's try again. Or there is something else to this story and we're only getting a piece of it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a huge rabbit hole that I'm just starting to fall down right now, is looking at, because I started getting into a study of the Hebrew words that end with I am, such as Elohim, cherubim, and seraphim. And it gets crazier and crazier, because there's just a whole lot of these things. And what they are is, they are always plural, and they are always at least semi-intelligent, like not animals. The im suffix is never used for any type of an animal, but it's always used for, I guess, what you would interpret as a living being. But in some of the cases, they kind of seem to be mechanical in some way. So I don't know what's happening. Are there robots, or is there AI? And I'm just at the beginning of that study, but there's a lot of these races, and some of them appear to be aquatic, and some of them seem to be sky, like the sky people or the space people. So it's possible that it's just another part of the same story, where people came from another planet and came to Earth. So because from our perspective, we would call those guys the space people, right? They're just,
exactly.
They're still people. They live on a planet, but just not ours. So it looks like they came from space.
And you kind of touched on them a little bit, and I wanted to, before we got too far into the show, I wanted to compliment you on that part too. I really like the fact how you went back to the root of a word, and you showed that this is, through the research, like this is in traditional Hebrew where this came from. This was the original script. This is what this word means. And then you kind of showed these are what these different translations have kind of turned it into. I don't want to say bastardize it, bastardize the word, but some have.
Well, they
some
did. They really did.
Yeah.
And there's no getting away from it. So and it's so firmly baked into the Christian theology that there's no turning back. We cannot separate even Yahweh from Elohim, even though they're totally different two words. There's no way to separate those without maintaining this house of cards that is now the basis of modern theology. But there's no reason in terms of the actual Hebrew to conflate those. Now, somebody's saying that's why he's the King of Kings, and that's a great point, because in a model like that, you could have the Elohim as some kind of I don't know, you could call them a divine race or alien race, or there's a group of people, I guess. Excuse me, and perhaps Yahweh is their king. Totally, that works. That's a workable model in this theology and in the text of the Hebrew. So I'd buy that. But there's also more to it, because there's some indications that I don't talk about in this book, but I might talk about in my next book, that Yahweh is Yahweh is basically a god, but he's like a regional god, and that the earth has been divided into a bunch of different regions, and Yahweh is in charge of this one area that includes Canaan, and I don't know the extent of the territory, but there's some evidence in there, and one of the things that is to me a strong support for that, even though it's kind of indirect, is is what Joshua says after Moses dies. So Moses has just died, and the people are now perched on the edge of the River Jordan, and they're ready to cross into the Promised Land and take what's rightfully theirs, in accordance of their divine promise, or whatever you want to manifest destiny, I guess. So there's all that brings up some other weird stuff, like but okay, let's not go into that.
What I found weird was when I was looking into Mark, when it said the voice came out of a cloud. It was like Mark 9:7. They said the voice came out of the cloud. Hear my beloved son. So they referred to clouds and pillars and fire as like the UFO. So do you think the door dropped down on the UFO and he started talking, or what do you think about that?
Yeah, so you're referring to the baptism of Jesus, right? At Jesus' baptism, yeah. So in I believe Mark and Matthew and Luke, I think also, they basically all agree on what happened there, and they all mention clouds, they all mention a voice, and I won't try to figure out which one's which, but one of them refers specifically to like it started to rain, and so this also occurs in a couple of places in the Psalms, where King David is talking about how Yahweh rides upon the cherubim and on 10,000s of cherubim, and he's the Lord of hosts. And he also talks about the storms and the rain and the clouds and actually the skies being open. And what it sounds to me like is there's a phenomenon that's been well documented recently, although of course the UFO deniers try to downplay this and don't make the connection, but I think that there's a UFO connection with this phenomenon that is known as punch clouds, hole punch clouds, or something like that. It's got a couple different names, and basically what happens is if you have a ship that is descending rapidly through the atmosphere, what it does is it causes a temperature gradient very quickly. And so the water vapor in the air is essentially supercooled and condenses very quickly, turns into ice droplets, and then is heavier than the clouds around it. So it makes a hole in the cloud. Yeah, there you go. Now, so that's a really great picture, and I've seen a lot of pictures that are even like very round, very, very circular. So that one there is kind of more of an oblong object. Yeah, it's still pretty cool. Yeah, there you go. And look at that. Look how distinct that is. So the climate meteorologists or climatologists or whoever it is that studies clouds basically say, oh yeah, that's because there was a sudden drop in temperature, and it causes the atmosphere to just drop out. Okay, yeah, I totally agree. But what causes that sudden drop of temperature? Because that's not normal. I would it would be more believable if it was a natural phenomenon. I could see if it was caused in a sudden rise in temperature, because hot air rises. So if you've got a bunch of hot air, like a temperature inversion on a hot day in the summertime, and all of a sudden that air is able to do what hot things do and rise, that would make sense. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying it's caused by something cold going through. Well, the only thing I can think of that is that could possibly do that is some kind of metallic object, and maybe there's like magnetics and stuff like that involved too. I don't know. Go ahead, Mark. Yeah.
I was just going to say, one of the samples that was on Craig's website that he just pulled up, there was a circle at the top of the screen. It looked like there was like the cyclone coming down, which
Kinda like
like that's maybe one of the
Oh, it's a small
samples.
one.
I think he had a couple
Yeah,
different ones
forget
up
that
there.
one. Yeah.
But
There you
that's
got your
also,
pillar of cloud right there.
yeah, and that's where I was going with that. But yeah, that's not a phenomenon like what you were talking about. Summer day and like some
Yeah,
kind of
If it's a
cold.
summer tornado, they form completely different.
Yeah, but this the pillar of fire was there for 40 years.
Yes,
The weather patterns don't linger that long.
that's right. And so look at the behavior of the movement patterns of this pillar of fire / cloud. So we know that it's cloud and fire. So what does that tell you? Well, the cloud is maybe just smoke, right? Because the clouds look like smoke. Smoke looks like clouds. Now, if you've got fire, where there's smoke, there's fire, but also where there's fire, there's smoke. So you're telling me that there's a pillar of fire and it's associated with a pillar of cloud. You don't have to be a scientist to know that that's probably smoke. So you've got a smoking, fiery pillar, and it is moving through the sky. Well, first of all, that doesn't happen. You don't have pillars of fire that move through the sky. But if you did, if they were some kind of natural phenomenon that we don't know about, then how is it that it moves for 8 to 12 hours and then it stops, so that the Israelites can make camp, and then in the morning it starts moving again? And not always. I mean, it also is explicitly stated that they were able to follow it in its movement during day or night. So I'm not saying that it's always night and day, morning and evening, but the fact remains that the Bible explicitly says that this cloud was moving and stopping for long enough for them to make camp and rest. So that's not a weather pattern.
No, well, and then also the pillar of fire from Exodus also foreshadows the Star of Bethlehem, which you started the show discussing that that wasn't a comet, because comets don't come across the sky then all of a sudden stop over the house, and then when the Magi show up and then it goes on. It's both examples defy the laws of physics.
Right. So they absolutely could be just, it's God just there. He's doing whatever. But I mean, if I'm God, I don't want to just wander around in the desert for 40 years. I'm going to send somebody to do that for me. I don't know. But I mean, we can't prove that, and we don't know what God's thinking, and his ways are higher than ours, so that's all fine. But the fact of the matter is, this is what the Bible said happened, and I find it very interesting. So the Bible says a lot of strange things, and we're a lot of times just not looking at what it's actually saying. So I kind of wanted to say something about the Elohim. No, I think we already talked about that.
We're talking a little bit. We could kind of go, because I had a couple here, because we'll touch on a couple of the examples, like just right out of your book too.
Okay.
Just kind of we'll start here, because one of the big ones, like a lot of people know these references, and the first one, like I brought a picture, is Jacob's ladder. That's one of the That's one of the ones
Right.
where a lot of people,
That's a good one.
yeah, the image of the angels, ascending and descending, up and down.
Yeah.
And I agree with the take where it's just, for me, in kind of a little bit what you were just talking about, it's not saying that what people believe of the Bible is wrong. It's one of those,
Right.
how much faith does it take to believe that all of this is from one almighty creator, but not to believe that there could also have been something that wasn't just a miracle, that was actually like an extraterrestrial, a craft that shows up, because it would be taken as the same sign. This is something that we don't know. This is
Absolutely.
just this boom, mind-blowing thing. It could easily be
Yeah.
attributed to the creator, but it could also be, another race.
For sure. And here's the thing is, like, I believe in miracles. I've had miracles happen to me, and I've actually been a part of performing miracles. So I'm not trying to say that none of these things are miraculous. In fact, they are definitely miraculous.
Oh, yeah.
But if God is taking the time to tell us a story, I think we owe it to him to listen to the story he's trying to tell us. And what I see instead is a lot of brushing over details and sweeping things under the rug. So let's look at this Jacob's ladder. That's a great story. So we're always told that it's angels, and that's fine. And I don't have a huge problem with it, except that the concept of angels is not biblical. You can't read the Bible and expect to learn what an angel is. It's not in there. So the word angel is a Greek word, and it is used in the New Testament. Jesus uses it a couple times. And then it's used, it's picked up by his apostles, or some of the, like Paul and Peter, some of the guys who end up writing the New Testament books. But it's an entirely Greek concept that is not found anywhere in the Hebrew or in the earlier Jewish writings or the Jewish understanding. So what we do have is this story that we're being told in church, and it relies on certain underlying assumptions. And now this is where things all start to really fall apart in terms of the things that we believe. And this is very difficult, so I'm not going to try and push anyone into it, because honestly, I think that's a bad idea. But I'll just say that the concepts that we base our entire belief system on are not as plainly stated as we like to believe, and many of them do not appear in the Bible at all, which we then turn around and say we only believe in the Bible. Yeah, but well, no, like not. So the angels in the Old Testament, wherever you see the word angel in the Old Testament, usually it is the word malaka, which means messenger. So this word messenger is used for stories such as Jacob's ladder and other stories where there are some unexplained beings. Sometimes they're flying, sometimes they just appear out of nowhere, but sometimes they're just ordinary people, and they're also called Malaka because it just means messenger. So we can't infer anything from the word Malaka other than these are people who are here for a reason, and part of that reason is that they have something to tell somebody. So, I mean, the same can be said for troops in the Iraqi desert. Those guys were on their way to deliver some kind of message to their commander about the battle that they, whatever. The same can be said about your FedEx courier. He's a Malaka. He's a messenger. So it doesn't make him an angel, and nor does it with these Malakas that Jacob witnessed at Bethel. But there is something more to it, because they're not just people, because Jacob had a strange experience, and it was strange enough that he changed his name and was known as Israel for the rest of his life. And so he named the place Bethel, which does not mean house of God. It doesn't mean house of God. It means house of the Elohim. And Israel means wrestling with the Elohim. So he definitely encountered something, and there was physical evidence, and he walked with a limp for the rest of his life, or at least for a long time afterwards, enough that it was worth writing that he had a limp afterwards, and he had a new name, and the place had a new name. So something very significant happened there, and it had to do with the Elohim. Yahweh does not appear in that story. There's no mention of Yahweh in the story of Jacob's ladder, nor in the story that precedes it, about 2 chapters earlier, where Jacob witnesses an entire camp of these Malaka, and again, he changes the name of that place. But on that particular instance, it was not a close encounter, because they were kind of like across the canyon, and he named the place 2 camps because he was here, they were over there, humans were here, Elohim were over here, and he was like, wow, that was really something. And it was really something until something even greater happened when he met them face to face and actually physically contacted one of them.
And I think that's kind of where you'd said earlier too about Yahweh, and that's where, through reading your book, that's the part I really liked in that one, is because you showed, if this was in fact, Yahweh referred to as God, the Almighty, I don't understand why it'd be used so sparingly. I mean, it would just be, I feel like this would be here or there, it would be constantly used in the same regards, but it seems to have, like you said, that's why I wanted to compliment you on using, showing the roots of all these words to show people that this is what this one actually, this is what it means. You're not telling us, well, now, ignore what everything's said in there. You're just saying this is what the root. So the question I have now, I'm pulling this thread. Why did they change it?
Well, okay, so that's a really great thread, and that's part of what my ongoing research is based around. And so let's take that root one step further. So Elohim means the people of El, kind of, or like the Him part means the people. So what does the El part mean? So take off the Ohim, and you're left with El. Now we all think that El means God, but it doesn't. It doesn't even mean that. So even if you look in your, if you guys have a Strong's concordance or any of the online concordances, and you look up, I can't tell you a verse to look up, but I'm getting to that in my research. Basically, the word El is used thousands of times in the Old Testament. Sometimes they translate it as God, specifically when it shows up in somebody's name. such as Daniel or, Raphael. Well, Raphael's not in the Bible, but Gabriel is. And generally, when it's in somebody's name like that, they always translate it as of God, or God's messenger, or God's strength, or something like that, which is it's fine. I mean, it's a pretty good estimation. But when you look at just the word El, when it shows up by itself, even then, sometimes it does seem to be a short form of the Elohim. But then there's these other thousands of references where it has nothing to do with that at all. And it's actually the word to, like, I went to town. I went El town. And so literally the word El means to. So now stick the Elohim back into context. So the Elohim are the people of two, or the two people. Now, if you're a two person, then, well, two doesn't have any meaning other than with the word from, because you had to go from someplace to come to another place. You don't just show up without having left the other place. So maybe Elohim means that people who are to Earth from somewhere else. And I don't have enough evidence to make that claim, but I'm just saying there's weird stuff here that's way deeper than what we think we know, because we don't know squat when it comes to this language Hebrew. The language has not been spoken. It's been revived, but for hundreds of years, there was not a single person on earth that spoke Hebrew. It was a dead language, and it lost all meaning completely. Now, the early Hebrew scholars were able to, kind of revive it, and it eventually picked up enough interest that it is now a commonly spoken language, and is now people's primary language in the nation of Israel and elsewhere. So it's fascinating, because we basically built this language based on the Bible. And the Bible was already, but it wasn't based on the Hebrew Bible. It was based on the English translations of the Bible, where we already know that the translations were not very accurate. So the language itself became based on an inaccurate translation of, I don't know if it was from English or wherever, but Greek, at least Greek or Latin. So like the whole thing is very self-referential, like a snake eating its own tail. And that's what the language of Hebrew is. So it's tricky.
Yeah, that was, I've kind of been through this journey through where I went to seminary school for a year. And so I was loved, because I always had questions that they didn't want to answer. Because it was just, because I always hit on these things where it's just, whether it was just, you go through, like I said, I won't get too far because it's not the scope of the show. It's, because I bet Jesus is the focal point of Christianity. I mean, this is the Christ.
Yeah.
Why is there so little known about this man? Here is the one that it's all centered around, and yet you have this, about the time he gets up to, he's turning the tables in the tabernacle, and then he's gone for 20 years.
Right.
Nothing.
Yet, so, but there are some traditions that tell those stories, those missing chapters. But we don't want to read those. We're not allowed to read them, actually.
No, it's,
why is that?
I mean, we don't even know what his favorite, you'd think you would know what his favorite food was. I mean, this is supposedly the Son of God. I mean, and the thing I always delved into is like the Romans, notoriously meticulous record keepers. They're recording all this information. This guy that supposedly that was such a threat in this area, there's no record of this. You can't go to these things and say like, oh yeah, there's this huge decree from Caesar in regards to this upstart, Jesus. I go, there's nothing. I go, unless the Vatican's holding them down in their vault, we have not been allowed to see these things. There are none of these records. And so when you go through, it's like you said, and then you go, that's why it's so imperative to go back to the actual, the original source, which you said,
Right.
it's like the Hebrew, and go from there, and then start from there and start building on it again.
Yeah, and there's a lot of other weird things that in terms of around that time of Jesus, there was a lot of stuff happening. So the Roman Empire was vacillating wildly back and forth between their views on various different religions and trying to consolidate their empire, and more importantly, trying to consolidate their culture, because the Romans understood that culture is empire. And I mean, look around right now. Facebook is ultimate proof. We are living in a global empire right now, aside from China and a few other people who aren't allowed on board. But literally, we're all connected. And the Romans were trying to build that, and they did a fantastic job of it, with remarkable systems of roads,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
shipping and all this stuff. And what the antiquities historians don't tell us, and they're still actively denying to this day, is that the Romans didn't invent any of that stuff, and neither did the Greeks, and neither did the Egyptians. But all of these great classical cultures were using technology and cultural inventions and things that had already been around for thousands of years, possibly tens of thousands of years. And this is becoming very well evidenced, despite the fact that the established academy does everything within their power to name call and basically get people fired for even thinking outside the box from what you're allowed to say, because you're not allowed to say that even the Sumerians had half the stuff that they had. And thank God for discoveries such as Göbekli Tepe, and
Oh, yeah.
people like Andrew Collins and
Greg Little.
what's that guy? Yeah. And what's that guy? Why can't I think of his name? He's one of my favorite guys. Anyway, there's a lot of people doing a lot of great research along those lines to show that we've been here for a lot longer than you guys think.
Graham
or that
Hancock's one of those too. That's
Graham Hancock, yeah.
Yep.
Graham Hancock, he's awesome. And what a great guy, and he's just got such a big heart. And every time you see him talk, a lot of times he's almost on the brink of tears, because he's just like, you guys, I care about everyone, and yet like we're being lied to. And to me, it kind of breaks my heart, because he's right, we're being lied to, and we're being lied to in so many ways. Pretty much in every topic you could think of.
The fact checkers have been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But they've always had the boot come down on them. So a lot of that information that we should know has been burnt, or the people who said it were burnt, or all kinds of terrible things have been done, and often in the name of God, and often in the name of truth, or in the name of politics or economy, or whatever bullshit whichever bullshit God you follow. And not to say that all gods are bullshit, but a lot of them are.
It's amazing the atrocities that are done in the name of a god.
Yeah.
It really is.
I don't know if you guys follow Jimmy from Bright Insight. He's got a YouTube channel.
I might have to check it out.
He's got some great stuff on there. Bright Insight. It's on YouTube, and he does a lot of stuff about Egypt, and just a lot of really cool stuff. But one thing that he brought up, where was I going with this? Dang it, man! I lost my train of thought completely.
You were talking about the Bright Insight website.
Yeah, but before that, why did I bring that up? He was mentioning
We talked about atrocities in the name of religion.
Yeah. Yes, that was it. So atrocities in the name of religion. Now, so I'll just throw this on there because we all know about the Salem witch trials, and we all know about the Spanish Inquisition, and we all know about the Crusades, and we all know about the continuing ways that we continue to do this, and a lot of them are very Christian based. And I'll throw the current thing that's happening in my country in Canada is that in over the last 100 years, and as recently as about 30 years ago, we would take Native kids and we would take them away from their families and we would throw them into essentially an orphanage, even though their mothers were kicking and screaming to keep them, and we would throw them in there and treat them terribly. And it's now coming to light that many of these children were killed essentially due to negligence in this system, and it's terrible. And it's the
a modern
same
genocide.
kind of shit that and it's no different than Black Lives Matter and Rodney King and all this same shit that we keep doing to each other. And so what Jimmy on Bright Insight showed us was, because he had an interesting perspective because he was actually deployed to Iraq during the Gulf War, and he had a video camera, and what he showed us was the city of I don't remember which city it was, but it was one of these really ancient cities in the Sumeria, Babylon region. I want to say it was actually Ashurbanipal, which is where they found that giant library of almost all this Sumerian texts that we now have come from there. So it was either from there or somewhere nearby that. And they also had these beautiful statues and a lot of carvings and temples and whatnot. And during the Gulf War, these guys who were part of these very right-wing extremist groups came and just started taking jackhammers and sledgehammers to these beautiful statues. Like, come on, guys! Just because, maybe it's a god, we don't know. Maybe it's not our god, so we must destroy.
You know what the conspiracy side of that whole thing is that whether here we go, conspiracy side is that what if these things were not over oil? What if these things were to use as a pretense to actually destroy this knowledge, so that way you could actually keep people subjugated without them learning the truth? Because as things open up, people are starting to discover stuff. Well, it's kind of hard to discover something that's been destroyed.
Yeah. Well, you're right, and there's tons of conspiracy, and a lot of it sounds really crazy. But when you start to think about it, it kind of starts to make sense. So I think that I don't tend to really follow the conspiracies, but whenever I hear one, generally I'm like, yeah, sure, that seems reasonable.
Because ISIS, I mean, look at that goes in there, and then all of a sudden, their whole thing is they were against, America. They were against this, the Western thing. Why all of a sudden are they just going whole crazy and doing everything from Buddhist statues of Buddha to all these ancient relics? And that's what seemed to be their prime focus, is destruction of these artifacts. We must destroy these things.
Right. And we do the same thing. And there was a rash of destruction last year, I guess, or it was, or whatever. Now, so here's one interesting book that I just read called The Day After Roswell, and I know some of you guys have read this. Now, this is by Colonel Philip Corso, who was a colonel in the U.S. Army, and he also worked in the Pentagon because he headed up the program, the Army R&D program. So whenever the Army was doing cool stuff about, hey, what new tech can we mess around with, he was in charge of all that. Not that he was necessarily hands-on, but He was in charge of it.
Mhm.
And his claim, so he's got a pretty good track record, pretty good resume. Like if I was looking for a guy to hire to manage my company, he's definitely overqualified, right? So I don't think that he's insane or a liar, but his claim is that a large part of the tasks that he was given at the Pentagon were these artifacts that the Army recovered at the Roswell crash in 1947, when a UFO crash landed in the desert outside of Roswell, New Mexico. So to me, that's a pretty credible witness. And he held these objects in his hands. And he also links that story all the way from 1947 through to 1961, when he became involved in it, which interestingly, a lot of interesting things were happening in the 1961 to 1964 time frame, which if you're into conspiracy theories, you'll want to check out another book, which is by Mike Barra, and he's talking about the hidden societies. I can't remember the exact title, but it's something like Conspiracies and Hidden Societies or something like that. And he goes into the whole JFK thing, and he ties it into the moon program. But he does it in a very evidence-based way. And it's not just like, hey, here's some crazy idea. It's like, hey, this we know this, we know this, we know this, we know this. What patterns do we see? And it's fascinating. So,
yeah, no,
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of crazy stuff happening that we have no idea.
like I said, and real quick, like I said, I want to get you a plug. We touched on it, but it's like, man, we got so caught up in some other stuff. It's like, it's amazing how fast an hour and 15 minutes flies by. So you had your other books, Magic in the Bible, and the Akkadian mythology. So wrap those, let's give us a 20-second,
Sure.
brief. I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Yeah.
10 seconds on this. It's very clear in the Bible that Daniel, the prophet Daniel, was the high priest of Babylon.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it, because that was one of the stories, like the Emerald Man.
Yeah.
And that's
so Daniel saw a green man come from the sky and get out of his craft, and he talked to him for a while. So that's in this book. But this other book talks about Daniel because his background is he's not a Christian, he's not a Jew. Well, he is Jewish, but he's a Babylonian Jew, and he doesn't practice Judaism per se. What he practices is Babylonian magic, and he's the number one head magician in the land of Babylon, which was a huge empire. And he served for 30 some odd years under no less than 4 or 5 different kings. So it wasn't just like, oh, he was, one guy's favorite dude, but he was legit. So also in this book, so Daniel is one of them. Joseph is also in there, and Moses as well, because I take a different tack rather than explaining some of Moses's activity through UFOs. I look at it, okay, well, what if it wasn't UFOs? What if it was magic? And there's a lot of evidence for that. So
would you be willing to come back on to talk about that book?
Yeah, for sure. And then this other book here, this is the Enuma Elish, which is one of the Sumerian legends, myths. They call it the creation myth. That's a bit of a misnomer. I'll actually just read you the back of the book on this one, because I think I did a great job summing it up here. So The Enuma Elish is widely known as the classic Akkadian creation myth, passed down from the Sumerian and replete with all the gods one has come to expect from ancient mythology. But is this an accurate reading? Were our ancestors superstitious rubes who relied on supernatural forces to explain their own existence? Or did they perhaps know another story that we have long forgotten, but whose truths continue to echo in our subconscious and in the modern day technological phenomena? This fresh interpretation for a technological age is the first analysis of these ancient texts to incorporate software engineering, navigational algorithms, and biotech into the Sumerian traditions in a wholly systematic and integrated way, avoiding wild interjection, but reading the text as an experienced engineer. So basically, I am not, so this is, I go even deeper into the texts because here, look at this page here. All that entire page is the straight up the text. So
Wow.
this book is about 90% original, like not non-original from me. It's the original text, and I use the standard translations. I don't even do any retranslation on this because honestly, I don't know very much about Akkadian. So I took the standard reading and I just look at it a little bit differently, and I go, what are they actually saying? And so if you think that everyone in the ancient world was always just interesting in worshiping like random idols and crap like that, then you end up with this very skewed kind of assumption on what their life was like, and you tell their story very differently. But if you assume that these people are actually reasonably intelligent people, like we are, and maybe they're not idiots, and maybe they're not just like always baffled by everything, but are actually telling us a story about something that really happened, well, what story are they telling? And so that's what that does. And in that, so I tackle concepts like Nibiru and the Anunnaki and some stuff like
Nice.
that. So people who are into Zecharia Sitchin are going to like this book. I sort of agree with Sitchin in terms of the broad strokes. I think we're sort of saying a lot of the same things. However, his interpretation of Nibiru is totally wacko. There's no way that that people can survive on a planet that has an orbit that takes thousands of years and goes millions of light years into space. It's way too cold. You can't survive on that. And there's a lot of other reasons. So what I do is I kind of start with the story, and I assume that I know nothing about what's going on, which is true. And because I wrote this book only by reading this text and writing notes to myself. That's all I'm doing. And so I'm like, oh, what's happening here? I had no preconceived notion of what it was about. I had never read it before. I read it and I started writing a few notes. And honestly, the notes are pretty sparse, but they may be sparse, but they are, I guess, intense is one way you could say it. Powerful.
Yeah,
and
he wrote this a while back in the close to the beginning of the show, but that's kind of what it is. If you want to learn about a topic, write a book.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and Ken, one of the interesting aspects of what you're doing is, we just look at the example of Moses and the burning bush. It's kind of like you get the Sunday school version of something kind of weird's going on with this bush, but you're having us look more closely at that there's something in the bush
Yeah.
Even and we could even take that to the Ezekiel's wheel
Absolutely.
situation. Yeah, those are two different stories, but you have require us to look deeper into what is being
Yeah.
discussed in the
So
meaning.
you're right. So first of all, I'm not going to just believe you if you're telling me something, because if you're trying to teach me about the Bible, I'm going to read the Bible. Sure, I'm interested in what your take is on it, but
Mhm.
like honestly, who are you? I'm here. This Bible is integrated into my religion. You're not. So, um, so I think it is very important to read the Bible, and I think one of the reasons that we have so much misinformation is that people do read the Bible. A lot of people do. Millions of people do. But how do they read it? Usually one verse at a time, which is a pretty crappy way to read any document. I would challenge you to tell me the plot line from Harry Potter by picking, telling me 7 words off of page 300 and then 5 words off of page 100. I'm not going to get it. I'm just not going to get the story. So the same thing is true about the Bible, and even more so because you have this additional barrier of the linguistic elements, and in terms of translating those into something that we can understand. You don't have to translate every word. And honestly, a lot of the from my experience, I don't have a problem with 90% of the words, or maybe 99%. But there's that 1% where something's not right here. So let's look at the burning bush. That's a great example. The story of the burning bush uses a specific Hebrew word that only happens in that one verse. That word is not found anywhere else in the Bible. So don't tell me that you know that it means bush. Nobody knows what it means. And on top of that, there's 2 words that do mean bush. 2 separate words, probably different. Maybe one's a little bush, one's a big bush. I don't know. But there's 2 other words in Hebrew that mean bush. Neither of those bush words are where Moses saw this thing. So it ain't no bush. I don't know what it is, but it's not a bush. Why do we call it a bush? There's no reason.
Yeah, we definitely got to have you back on. I said I'm gonna. I'll hit some dates. I said serious. We're gonna get you because I looked at the time. I'm like, oh my god, we're almost an hour and a half. So we're definitely gonna have to have you back on. So everybody check. Before I want to wrap it. There's a quote at the end in the conclusion. There was one. That this book, it's done so in a way that is enlightening rather than frightening, and hopeful rather than upsetting. And that's really, I think that was a really good way to wrap up what the book was, is because there wasn't any definitive. It was just like, here's the facts.
Yeah.
It's like you said, I mean, the only thing that was like a definitive is like, this is what the word is for bush. This wasn't used in this instance. I'm not telling you what it was. I'm just telling you it can't be this. Because that word's not used here.
And there's a lot of things that I could say based on my research in the last 5 or 6 years that could make me very angry or very vindictive towards the church and towards faith and towards Christianity. But that's not what I'm trying to do, and I don't want to come crashing in on anybody's faith because honestly. Faith is a very important thing to have, and we do need something to hold on to. But having said that, I think that we maybe put a little too much. Maybe we put too much faith in our faith. So we need to have faith, but we also need to be aware of the fact that hey, things aren't always what they seem, and. It's not the case that everyone's always told us the truth about everything.
Yeah, that's
it's a lot bigger world.
Yeah, and so everybody, thank you. Everybody needs to go. So I said in the beginning of the show, you need to go to Dimension Fold on YouTube. Check him out there. Subscribe to that channel. Watch this. They've got, like I said, just click on the videos, and there's much conversation along the same lines of what we've just been taking place. So watch those, share this information out there. Go to Amazon.
I'll say too on that. I don't have a ton of content out on that, and right now I've been really busy focused on doing this stuff, so I haven't done any videos on my channel for a little bit. But if any of your listeners, anybody who's listening now, has something that like is a weird experience that you would like to talk about on a YouTube channel, I am currently open to booking some guests on that. So
Awesome.
Definitely subscribe and comment, or I'm not sure if my email address is on there, but you can track me down somehow possibly through my other dimensionfold.com. I've got a contact thing on there. So
yeah, you got that. So, yeah, go to dimensionfold.com. Yep, they said authors Ken Goudsword.
Yeah, that's right. So somewhere on there, I run that whole website. So even if you just go to the root directory, there's going to be a contact page, and you can get a hold of me that way.
Absolutely. Once we're done here, I will be purchasing this one, by the way, just to let you know.
Cool.
Make sure this on, because I got to kind of be prepared for the show. So
yeah. Well, sales are always good, and so are reviews. If any of your listeners are going to read and purchase this book, please do leave a review. It makes a big difference, because a lot of times people don't realize that reviews are kind of the lifeblood of Amazon. And I have a lot of my books are newish, so they don't have reviews, and therefore nobody wants to buy them. But yeah, reviews are awesome. And I hope that I can come back. Well, you know what? I can. Yeah. So let's do this again for sure.
Yes. Awesome. Yes, we have definitely. Yeah, definitely. Because
Ken, I really enjoyed your books. There's a verbal review going out over to Ron and Patriot Radio's stations. So you make some great points, and if the listeners enjoyed when Jim Willis and Michael Carter have been guests, and they're friends of yours as well.
Yeah,
it just getting you to think deeper without maybe you change your readers' perspectives, but you're not doing it in a sacrilegious way. It's just asking people to read what's there.
Absolutely. Thank you. That means a lot, Mark. We're in this huge world, and it's hard to take it all in. So sometimes we kind of retreat into a little box where it's safe. But I'm here to tell you it's safe to look outside that box. And and if you take a step outside, and there's people like us around here to support you with that journey as well, because it does get tough at times.
Absolutely. You can't look at stuff from one angle, and I really enjoyed the show. You got me to talk. Normally I'm resting bitch face, but I enjoy. I mean, not to say that I don't enjoy all the shows, but this topic is just. Have you? Also, I had one question before we let you go. Have you looked into masonry? Because some of the burning bush is in the Royal Ark. It's in different passage of masonry. I mean, so
right.
Yes, I just had that was a question I had earlier.
I know very little about masonry, other than I know that it's pretty intriguing and fascinating, and there's some really weird stuff going on in there. You think Christianity is weird? Take a look at Freemasonry. But yeah, it's going to be one of those things where it's going to be really difficult to sort through the wheat from the chaff. And honestly, I think that there are probably a lot of people who are already doing that. So for now, at least, I'm kind of focusing on stuff that only I seem to be doing, and I've got a ton of work left to do. So
Awesome. Well, everybody, like I said, go subscribe, please. Like I said, support him. Go to Amazon, leave a review, pick up the books. I said, if this show interests you, you've got to read the book. We scratched the surface. We didn't really touch on a lot of stuff that was in the book because, like I said from before the show, I was like, isn't going to be your normal like talking points. We're going to hit on some of the stuff that you don't normally really focus on, and so and hopefully we achieve that. I'm hoping.
For sure. That was a lot of fun. Thanks, Craig, and thanks, Chris, and thanks, Mark. You guys are awesome to talk to, and I would love to sit down and chat with you some more.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Well, hey, take care. And just everybody, once again, check him out. And this show is brought to you by threebeardspodcast.com because we're still hoping for a sponsor. So we'll get that. But in the meantime, you can support us by going to Outer Realms Bathworks, and they made a signature beard blend for us. So you can support us by going there and purchasing that. And you can also go to redbubble.com /3beards podcast. Check out our merchandise there. You can also get to that through threebeardspodcast.com. Get there, or you can go to patreon.com, become a beardo. We're still waiting for our first one. Somebody's going to do it. One of these days, we're going to just wake up one morning and we're going to be shocked to hell. Is that something we got a Patreon? So eventually that'll happen. But I just wanted everybody to go check out the social medias. We are on everything: TikTok, Instagram. We have 2 accounts on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Go subscribe, like, and while you're there, make sure you hit up Ken at Dimension Fold. Make sure you subscribe. Looks like I know you already picked up one for sure. Laura said she already subscribed, so you got one for sure there. And she said she may have some stories for you too. So
Sweet.
Yeah, so that'll work out. So everybody, just thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. And like I said, everybody, we will see you at ERT Radio at 11 p.m. Producer reminded me. I was trying to forget that one. Ron, rebroadcast there after Into the Outer Realms. So check us out. That's every Wednesday night starting 11-ish. Our show is rebroadcast there. Once again, thank you everybody for watching. Check us out there. Like I said, Ken, thank you so much again. Appreciate it. Mark, thanks for being on the show, helping us out.
Had a great time.
Good night.
Thanks, guys.
The